Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know about spring crankbait fishing. We're going to break down everything you need to know from gear, how to choose the right crankbait, and ultimately how and where to fish to catch some fish. So we're going to get to cranking. Hopefully we'll catch a couple today. The water's extremely dirty. Not really used to fishing this lake like this, but that doesn't mean we won't catch any. So we're going to start cranking around and see if we can find us some bass. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is how important a good rod and reel is and what the right rod and reel is for springtime crankbait fishing. This time of year, especially as the water's colder, we do actually have some surprisingly warm-ish water today. I got between 52 and 54 degrees coming around on the lake, which is fairly warm. That's pretty far into the pre-spawn. But I'll fish a crankbait. I mean, I've caught them out here and doing this technique in the spring, like 42, 44 degree water temperature. So when the water's that cold, those fish aren't going to slam this bait, hit it really hard, get good hook sets, everything like that. It's going to be really soft bites, and a lot of times you'll get them with just one treble hook, maybe two. And there's one right there. He's a little guy. Is he? Is he a little guy? I don't know. And you can see I play these fish really soft. He's not a little guy. He's not little at all. Okay. So this is why it's important to have a good rod. This fish is barely hooked, so you can see that big soft rod. I can get a good hook set on them. I can play them soft. They can come up and shake their head. They're not going to jump or do anything crazy. He actually ended up getting another hook in him because of the softer rod there. And I can just come over here and grab them and they don't come off. That's actually a really nice fish. So that's very important to have that soft rod. I only had 2 hooks in him and it started with just one. So I actually just had that first hook, and then when he came up and shook, he got that other hook. And that's important to have really sharp hooks too, because that can happen. So if you hook them with just one and they come up and shake, you can get another hook if you have really, really sharp hooks and that soft rod. So let me weigh this guy, get him back in the water. That's probably the biggest one we caught so far. We filmed a jig video earlier, but that might be the biggest one of the day. And then we'll talk more about why that rod's important and what you should be selecting. So that fish was a perfect example of why you want that soft rod. I hit that fish back there by that piece of wood and he swam right at the boat. And I thought he was tiny. I mean, out here you'll catch a lot of males that are 10, 12 inches long. They don't really fight very hard. So I hooked that fish that swam towards me. I thought it was a little baby one. And as soon as I got him to the boat, he took off underneath the boat, and that's when that rod loaded up. So if you had a stiff rod there, I only had that one hook in it, that fish would have pulled off immediately. As soon as he pulled that way, you would have just pulled that hook right out of that fish's mouth. So especially when the water's cold, you want to have a rod that bends a lot, way back into the backbone like that. So you don't have to use the same equipment as me. If you want to support the channel, I'll put all the codes and descriptions and links down below. If you buy any of the 6 Sense crankbaits, which we're going to talk about here shortly, you can use my code Quince. You'll save 10% off your order and you'll be helping me out a bunch. But this is the Cash and Core crankbait rod. That's what I've been using the past couple years. It's been excellent. Caught tons of big fish on it last year. Caught my first big fish on it this year doing that right there. And this is the 7-foot moderate fast action, the medium heavy power. So it has some backbone. You can get a good hook set and handle those big fish. You just have to play them gently next to the boat there. But it has that moderate fast action, really bends back into the rod. So that's super important. And then I pair that up with a Shimano Corrado 200. This is to the 200, so I have a bigger spool so I can put more line on it and get a far cast. All my crankbait reels have that bigger spool. And then this is the 6 gear ratio. I usually fish a 7 MGL, but I fish a 6 on my crankbait rods because I like to force myself to slow down, which we'll talk about later. But it's very important to just grind that crankbait really slow around these fish, and it'll get you more bites. Fishing slow and fishing thorough. We'll talk about that shortly. I spool this up with 12-pound test fluorocarbon. Usually I used to use 10 and I'd break off a lot because those fish, they get, even if they rub you up against a tiny log like that or something, you can get broken off on 10 pound. Just that little upgrade to 12 is a noticeable difference on the amount of fish you'll land. My line's actually still pretty good there, so we'll keep fishing it. But I've used 12. If you're fishing really heavy cover, you can go up to 15, even 17. Just know that every step up you make, you're gonna lose about a foot off your diving depth. So on a day like today, where the water's actually pretty high on this lake, that 1 foot of diving depth can make a difference. So I like 12. It tends to keep it in the strike zone where the fish are, and I can still get them out. So that is my setup here that I like to use for cranking around these fish and trying to catch some big ones. So we'll see if we can run into a couple more. I caught 2 big ones in my jig video earlier today, and I just caught that big one there. So we're 2 big ones away from having a really nice bag for the day, which would be pretty awesome to catch a big bag first day out. But we'll keep trolling around, we'll see what we can find. The next important thing to touch on is actually your crankbait selection. This is, again, part of your gear, but this is also a very important time of year to choose the right crankbait to actually catch fish. It is probably this time of year the biggest difference maker, besides how and where to fish it, on how many fish you're gonna catch. Other times of year when they're a little bit more aggressive, you can get away with maybe not choosing the perfect crankbait for the perfect conditions. But in the spring, I'm a big believer of choosing the right crankbait, and I have a lot that I choose from. I am just going to talk about, smack my trolling motor there. I'm just going to talk about shallow diving crankbaits today because we're doing largemouth fishing. We're on a largemouth only lake, and I fish shallow cover with wood for largemouth right in the beginning of the year. It's one of my favorite ways to catch them. I do also fish smallmouth with crankbaits in the springtime as well. I do it completely different than what I'm doing right now, so I'm not going to touch on that. We will do another video in the near future actually talking about how to catch smallmouth on crankbaits and different crankbaits that I choose for that and everything like that. So this is only shallow diving crankbaits that I'd use for largemouth this time of year. And there's basically 2 options for me. I'm gonna choose between a flat side or a square bill. So today, water's still cold, it's very early in the spring. I'm going with the flat side. I probably could get away with a square bill today because 1, of how muddy the water is, and 2, we're pushing 52+ degree water temperature. So anytime I'm up in that like 54 to 55+ range, that's when I'm going to go to that square bill and start throwing that with the additional vibration. Or if you have very muddy water like this, sometimes you need it just to get those bites. Clearly don't think I need it today because I just caught that fish, so I'm going to stick with my flat side because sometimes I think it'll get me a couple extra bites. But when the water is very cold, in that 40 degree range that I was talking about earlier, that's when I will exclusively fish that flat-sided crankbait. It's pretty much the only way to go that time of year that I feel like gets you more bites. It has that subtle vibration, and everything's just moving slower in the water, so it tends to work out a little bit better fishing that type of bait. Then when it comes to color, the 2 crankbaits that I fish the most, this is the Finesse Flat F4 from 6th Sense. They just came out with the Pressure series as well. I don't have any, but either one of those would work as your flat side. And then the Crush 50X is my go-to for a square bill. Either one, depends on what you're fishing. Choose from those 2. Again, you don't have to use the exact baits that I do. If you like a KVD 1.5 or you like a Rapala DT or something like that, go with those baits. They still catch fish. Like I said, I'm just with 6th Sense. I've been using their baits for years and years, and I believe in these baits because I've caught plenty of fish on them over the years. So those are the baits that I choose. And then when it comes down to color, it's really basically what your fish are eating and what your watercolor is. A lot of times in the spring, you have this dirty water and runoff and all this rain. So one of the only colors you can get away with catching a fish is these red colors. So this is boiled crawfish. The black and the red contrast is probably the biggest key, as opposed to just a straight red crankbait. It's not the red color that catches them, it's the contrast that catches them. So I like the black and the red, boiled crawfish color, probably my favorite springtime crankbait color of all time. And then also you could probably get away with like a chartreuse and black in this water because that's a very contrasting color too, especially if your fish are feeding on shad. That's probably a good choice. And then the other colors are just like your shad patterns. If you have some clear water, depends on the lake you live. Some lakes you fish, they might not get this dirty runoff, or like you might just not have rain that spring. So the less bright colors will still catch fish. So I keep all of them with me, but if I had to choose one, it would be this red color. It catches me more fish than any other color in the springtime, so I tend to use the black and the red boiled crawfish color and catch some fish with it. So let's keep cranking around and see if we can get us another one. And the last thing to talk about with spring crankbait fishing is really how and where I'm fishing this bait, especially for largemouth. I'm fishing a lot of these banks that have wood under the water, and really the most important thing is just to make your bait make contact with stuff under the water there. You will catch fish just kind of reeling it through the column, especially in the spring when they're up there shallow and they're active. But if you want to catch those bigger ones, get some bigger quality, or just catch more numbers, it's really banging your crankbait into stuff up there. You'll notice when I'm fishing this bait, what I'm actually doing is almost fishing it like a jig. I will literally pitch it to little pieces of cover up on the bank and stuff that looks good. It helps when the water's a little bit cleaner and you can see further down, but I'm making short, accurate casts as close as I can to pieces of cover and banging it into the cover as much as I can the whole way back. And then I just keep repeating that, and I'm very thorough. When you think of springtime crankbait fishing, a lot of what you think about is just like covering water with a crankbait and burning down a lot of bank. I'm covering water faster than I would with a jig, but I'm fishing it almost like I would a jig. By pitching it into places where I would pitch the jig, I can cover more area, but I'm still being thorough, I'm still being diligent in where I'm casting, and I'm covering all the water I can. I also, you'll notice a lot of times I'll turn back, like that first fish I caught, I literally turned back and casted behind the boat like that into a piece of cover that I didn't really get a good cast on. I'll turn around and make casts like that a second time to get a different angle. A lot of times your crankbait might run a little left, a little right. You don't really know what it's doing. I try to tune them the best I can, but it might not always hit that log perfectly every time. So I'll make multiple casts to the same piece of cover if I feel there should be a fish there, just to make sure I'm giving it the best chance to have seen my bait and actually getting that fish to bite. So what we're going to do is keep working our way down through here. I'll cover all this water, pitch into all these little places, reel it through nice and slow. And once I get it bouncing into the cover down there, I slow my reel down and I just keep it working in place and coming through there as slow as I can, because those fish really don't want to move this time of year. And also with how dirty this water is, a lot of times that's the difference between catching fish and not. If it flies through their face, they can't see it. But that's why I make those multiple casts even. You could bring it through there 2 or 3 times. It might be facing one direction or the other, and you finally get that crankbait in front of that fish's face and it'll be willing to bite it. So we're very thorough with our casts. That's how I like to cover water with a crankbait, not just making bomb casts like that and reeling it at a 45-degree angle down the lake as fast as I can. Like I said, you'll catch fish doing that, but you'll catch way more if you're bouncing it into cover, or you'll catch the bigger ones, because those ones are a lot smarter than the little 12-inchers that swim around all over the place up shallow once springtime rolls around. So we're going to cover some water and keep working our way down the lake here, and hopefully we can find us another one and show you how effective this crankbait can be even in this muddy conditions, or just overall trying to find fish in the springtime. One of my favorite ways to do so. So let's get back to fishing, see if we can catch us another big one. Well, unfortunately, we just lost our crankbait and we got to head home for dinner, and so I ran out of time. Fish are being very difficult right now. I can't blame them. We got record amount of rainfall this week and it has completely muddied up the water. I've never seen anything like it. This is the dirtiest I've ever seen this lake. I'm surprised we even caught the fish we did. But hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did and you want to see me using this technique more when the water conditions were more prime, check this video out right here. This is explaining why this is one of my favorite crankbaits for springtime, and more about how I'm fishing it and like worming it through cover. So check that video out right there. Hit that subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching. There's going to be a ton of on the water content coming soon. I might even try and go do some smallmouth fishing next weekend. Not really sure. We'll see where the weather takes us, but we're definitely going to find a clear water fishery next week and go do some of that instead of all this dirty water here. So stay tuned. A lot of on the water stuff coming soon. See you on the next one.